Hey, so it's National Domestic Violence Awareness Month in October of 2020, and let's talk about let's talk about culture abuse. Now, when we are thinking about culture abuse, a lot of times we think, what? Like, that's part of domestic violence? How can that be part of domestic violence? What does that have to do with talking about domestic violence awareness? Well, if you grew up in the same town and married a guy from across town, then you know what? Maybe cultural abuse is not going to have touched your life. But if you moved to a new country to be with your spouse, or you got married and your spouse moved you to a different place or a completely different region of the country that you live in, or if you came from another country to marry, I'm in America, so I'm speaking about marrying an American, and then that American person, your American spouse, is not helping you with adjusting to the culture, or you have some kind of cross-cultural marriage that can happen, cross-cultural relationship, blah, that's a big mouthful, cross-cultural relationships can can happen in a number of ways, whether you're an American and you move to another country with your spouse, whether you're both from here and you move elsewhere and then your spouse starts using that culture to manipulate you, or whether you are from another country and you've been moved to America. All of those types of pairings, types of situations are just ripe for cultural abuse. So, in the context of domestic violence, what then does cultural abuse look like? Using culture to cause abuse to someone else. So here are 6 things that can be signs that you are in a domestic violence relationship, especially if they are paired with any of the other aspects of the 13 forms of systems of abuse. So, number 1, in culture abuse, someone who mistreats you and then blames it either on their cultural expectations or on yours. Or they say, well, that's just how things are done where I come from. That's just how my family did things. You have to go along with it, even if it's bad for you, even if it's unsafe for you. Now, this is not the same as someone having ways of doing things that they're accustomed to and still being open to yours. This is talking about toxically using their culture or your culture to keep you from having healthy emotional and physical and spiritual freedom. Now, there can be a lot of gray area in culture, right? Cultures are very different. Mindsets are very different. I've just been reading this book, which I am totally going to do a book review later on. I'm only about a third of the way through it, but it is so good. Misreading the Scripture with Western Eyes. It talks so much about how we can completely misunderstand even someone else's good intentions simply because of cultural mindsets. Our worldviews can be very, very different. So if you're in a cross-cultural relationship, then you're going to have to do a lot of extra communication, and you're going to have to both be people who are very humble and respectful and willing to listen to each other in order to have and build a healthy relationship. But too often, when one person, especially the husband, when one person is from a different culture, they just say, this is my culture, and they use it as an excuse for poor behavior, for immaturity, for impulsivity, for domination, for gender-based control, for coercion, for sexual assault even. And they just say, well, that's just how we are where I come from. And then that becomes, when you are being harmed based on the excuse of someone else saying that's where it is where they come from, that becomes an aspect of domestic violence. I just want to make a comment based on one of the posts that I see dropping underneath, is that this can include, it's not limited to, of course, but it can include aspects such as disability culture, like the deaf community. There can be types of abuse that are perpetrated more simply because of um, someone's lack of ability, a disability. I know there are different ways to phrase it, and I don't want to be culturally insensitive, because I'm not necessarily fully acquainted with all the right terms for all disability cultures. But if you have a limited ability in a certain area and someone exploits that against you because you are part of the deaf culture or the blind culture or another form of disability culture, that would absolutely fall into this same kind of category when it's being used to exploit and to harm you by someone in your home or in your marriage. So, number one is someone who mistreats you and then blames it on their cultural or your cultural expectations. Number two, someone who demeans you because of your heritage, your ethnicity, your skin color, your language, or your religious background. So if they are demeaning and belittling you based on these things, that is a form of culture abuse. Number three, someone who forces you to embrace their heritage, their culture, their language at the expense of your own. Now, I'm not talking about, again, two people and they have different values and they are trying to both figure out how to coexist with their different values in a healthy, peaceful, communicative way. I'm not talking about the presence of differences. I'm talking about when the husband is forcing the wife to give up all of her own culture, her own language, her own foods, her everything, simply because he believes his culture is preferable to yours. What if someone is refusing to let you celebrate your holidays or your customs, or to be proud of who you are and where you came from? Those things can fall into domestic violence, especially when they are paired with other things such as emotional, psychological, financial, and other forms of abuse. Number four, someone who isolates you from mainstream cultural practices, someone who keeps you away from friends or activities that aren't rooted in their culture. So this can wander off into the direction of spiritual abuse, where you have someone who says, hey, that thing doesn't align with my spiritual culture, and they use power and coercive control to keep you from doing healthy, appropriate things. I'm not talking about parents protecting their children from dangerous influences, not talking about that kind of stuff. I'm talking about toxic, unhealthy, coercive control based on someone's religious beliefs, based on their culture, their family culture, or religious culture. Another thing in this isolation for culture abuse can be using language barriers to prevent you from healthy socialization. Let's say you don't know the language very well yet or at all, and your spouse, your husband, refuses to translate for you, or just never bothers to fill you in on what's going on, or has conversations around you or right in front of you in his home language, but does not include you in it, doesn't make you part of the culture, and doesn't open the door for you to be able to participate. That can be a form of isolation, which is an abuse tactic. Someone who silences you, this is number five, silencing you by using cultural expectations or family shame to keep secrets, to cover for someone else's sins, to avoid friendships, or just to do everything their way at the expense of your own independent humanity. That is a form of domestic violence. Someone who exploits you by using language barriers or your lack of knowledge about the culture where you are or the culture they are from in order to keep you from money, to keep you from socialization, to prevent your interaction with others, and to lock down your freedom. These are aspects of domestic violence They are aspects of abuse, can be included in intimate partner abuse. And because very often those in cross-cultural relationships don't always have the same amount of access to information due to language barriers or whatever else, it can be very, very difficult for them to get help. I've included the National Domestic Violence Hotline. I've included a PDF ebook download from my website called Systems of Abuse, a guide to recognizing toxic relationships. And all of those are in the description of this video. We're at 10 minutes. I try to keep them short. Please go and check out the YouTube channel at youtube.com/c/Sarah McDougall, McDugal. And if you want to see the rest of this series, check out the Systems of Abuse playlist right here on the Facebook page at facebook.com/Sarah McDougall. If you know someone who is in a culturally abusive situation, please find a way to share this with them. Post it on your page. Help them get the help that they need. Share with them the National Domestic Violence Hotline. Talk to them about how these are forms of domestic violence and it is not okay. They have every right. You have every right to seek safety and freedom and help in a healthy environment. In the meantime, stay safe. Thank you for watching. And if you liked this, please share it and let someone else know this same information. Have a really, really great day.